Welcome, guys, to a very special edition of All Things Football. Today, of course, we have a South African legend joining myself, Riaz, my fellow Mank, Sal Ibrahim, and of course, our resident Geordie, Wasim Ibrahim. And just to let you guys know, before we had the likes of Virgil van Dijk, before we had Harry Maguire or Kalidou Koulibaly, we had the towering imposing presence of Matthew Booth, and he's a man who represented the country at the 2000 Olympics, was part of a World Cup squad, and won league titles with Mamelodi Sundowns, played overseas in Russia as well. Gentlemen, welcome, and a huge welcome to you, Matthew. Welcome to our show and to our channel.
No, thank you very much. Hell, I don't know how you could have named those names in the same sentence as me, but no, but it's thanks again for the invitation. It's great to be on board.
Our absolute pleasure, Matthew. So, Matthew, of course, you come from a small town called Fishoek. Funnily enough, I actually grew up in Simonstown, which is just a stone's throw away. So I know that part of the world very well, have very fond memories of that side of the world. Just tell us, how is it that the boy from Fishoek got into football, and tell us a bit about how your journey began.
Yeah, so my father had three brothers, and all four of them played amateur football at the local football club, Fishoek AFC. It was established in 1932, so it's one of the older amateur clubs in the region. And my school didn't offer football. So I played first team cricket, first team rugby at school. I really enjoyed it, but I was dead keen on my football. So I got my football fix at the local club. And yeah, I suppose it was my dad's influence, and following the game. But it's a great setup there. And even today, they've got a huge youth membership, and keeping the youngsters off the streets and out of trouble, which is great to see.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And of course, the work in the community is very important as well. So I hope that that club goes from strength to strength going forward. And of course, to have a name like yourself really make it in the professional ranks must bode well for youngsters coming up from the club as well.
Yeah, and back in the day, there wasn't a black township. Now they've got Masiphumelele there, which is growing and growing. And the colored township is Ocean View, and in the old sort of white suburb, so-called, is obviously Fishoek. And so there's now a very nice correlation between the three areas, and they draw from that talent from all three of those areas. So it's really fantastic to go down there on a Tuesday, Thursday night, and on the weekend and see what's going on there. Just Ocean View itself, being such a small place, has generated some fantastic athletes. Emile Baron, Franklin Kale, just to name a few from my generation that made it as professionals coming from that area.
Well, on that note as well, just to delve a bit into some of the early days of your career at an international level. So when I was in grade 9, I remember my handbook teacher bringing a very small television to school. I think it was 37 centimeter, nothing in comparison to what we have today. And the reason that he brought the TV to school was we were all amped up. We were all excited to watch South Africa under 23 take on Brazil at the 2000 Olympics. Now, of course, the history of Brazil as a footballing nation is stuff of absolute folklore, and playing them is the pinnacle of most players' careers. On that day as well, Matthew, you came up against some names, some household names like Fabio Aurelio, and also another name you came up against. Not too sure if you guys know this guy. Goes by the name of Ronaldinho. Don't know if you heard of him. But yeah, you came up against Ronaldinho as well. Tell us, Matthew, what was your memory of playing in that tournament, and just take us through some of the emotion of that epic game and the subsequent victory.
Yes, so the journey to get there was probably the most fascinating part of that. Our first pre-qualifying game was against the massive footballing nation of Togo, and we actually drew away from home there, and we were quite lucky to do that, in fact. So it just shows how some of the greatest and sort of longest journeys start off with a bit of lady luck going your way. We then beat them at home 1-0 to go through to the group. And in our group, I think we had Cameroon, Ghana, and Guinea, which was quite tough. And we were able to create a fortress on the east rand of Johannesburg at a place called Vosloorus, which was a very tight, small stadium. And it was chock-a-block every single game, and that was part of our success, a huge part of our success, actually. And not many teams, including Bafana Bafana, but also local clubs, have cottoned on to establishing a base and using it and making it as your fortress, Europe, they've had over 100 years to get it right. And of course, it's very much community-based football surrounding the stadium. But in football, we have a different, here in South Africa, we have a different history, but we haven't seemed to get that particular aspect right. And we actually ended up becoming the second best placed team out of the three groups, which meant we had to then go into a playoff against New Zealand, home and away. And we finally managed to qualify for the Olympics, which was, it was massive. It was a 6-year journey, which culminated in getting to the Olympics for the first time. And I think that Brazil game was probably my best game that I've played in my career. We had lost the opening game against Japan, and I just woke up on the right side of the bed and looked forward to this challenge that came up. And even back then, we knew who Alex was, we knew who Ronaldinho was, and we beat them 3-1, which was just an incredible result.
Absolutely. I mean, if I take a look at the lineup that we had that day, I mean, you mentioned Emil Baron earlier. I know he was playing his trade in Norway as well. He was the goalkeeper on the day. You partnered Aaron Mokoena, who had the likes of Quentin Fortune, Delron Buckley, Benny McCarthy, David Cannemeyer. The list goes on. There's massive names there from a South African footballing perspective. And also you touched on Vosloorus. I mean, I remember Jomo Cosmos playing a lot of the PSL home games in Vosloorus. And to me, whenever I watched the game being played there, it was reminiscent of the atmosphere at Umtata Bushbucks would have at their stadium when they were still in the PSL. So I completely agree with you that, South African clubs should maybe go back to the people, go back to the townships where they can get real proper support, fill the stadiums and, generate a magnificent atmosphere for the game.
Yeah, now you wearing a Man United shirt, right? And you South African, and you struggle to identify with any particular club because a lot of the clubs are nomads, and they tend to move around and change franchises and buy and sell, etc. And so we only really stuck with 3 big clubs at the moment. And unfortunately, a lot of the younger generation guys who are looking to support a club will naturally harbor towards your Pirates, Chiefs, or Sundowns, and that's not necessarily good for our football, and that's got to change, certainly.
From my side, like if I look at Cape Town as a footballing city, in my time as a supporter, we've had Cape Town Spurs and 7 Stars, which was obviously when you were playing, and then it merged to Ajax Cape Town, but then they've had some issues. Santos were Premier PSL champions. They've had issues. They've gone down into lower divisions. Now we've got Cape Town City who bought a franchise and basically trying to establish themselves. So it's very difficult for us, even as Cape Townian, to stick with one team because we've seen so many changes in this area itself. So totally agree that we need to work on that, because that's how you build a base, and then from there you can develop players and grow as a footballing club. But Sal, you can continue with what you wanted to say.
Yeah, so no, I definitely I can understand what Matthew's saying. Like starting at Cape Town Spurs, like I remember going to watch a game of theirs, and when you're that young, you don't quite understand the concepts of like franchises and clubs getting into debt and disappearing. When we first got into football, we saw clubs as a place where we can, put our loyalties to. And so from what I remember, in Cape Town Spurs, that was my first experience of seeing a club kind of disappear. But sticking to Cape Town Spurs, Matthew, which was way back, I think, 94, 95, what did you, when you first started out there, what did you envisage your career as? What path was it going to take? What did you foresee back then? And the reason I ask that is because, a lot of youngsters that start out, they all, I imagine they all think they're going to end up at a Man United, or they're going to end up at, obviously, which is good, which is excellent to have those kind of dreams. But what did you envisage? I want to know from a personal point of view when you started out at Cape Town Spurs.
Yeah, so I played for Fishhook from when I was 5 years old until 17, and then we had a pretty good team at that stage when I was 17, and we got invited to the very prestigious Bay Hill tournament. And that's where I got spotted by Mr. Avray, who was the coach of the senior team at Cape Town Spurs. And I then moved across to their Colts team, played 2 years there for the under-19s. I used to catch a train from Fishhook to Cape Town, and then Cape Town to Paro with my homework and all my books and stuff. So I remember that vividly, my last year of matric. And when I left Fishhook, at that stage, I didn't have any dreams or any sort of objectives of becoming a professional footballer. It was only when Mr. Avray pulled me aside at that tournament where I realized, hang on, I could actually make a career out of this. I was just loving the game at amateur level, and I was very competitive, and it was basically a scout or a coach who saw me and picked me up, and that immediately changed my whole demeanor, and I realized that actually I could make a career out of this. And I arrived at Cape Town Spurs, who actually did win the 1994 league, but a boardroom decision kind of gave it to Pirates. And that kind of angered the owner of Cape Town Spurs, and he decided that 1995 was going to be their year, and they ended up winning the double. And that was a side full of talent. So as a youngster, I was very, very lucky to arrive at a club with the likes of Sean Bartlett, David Modise, David Inyati, Ronnie Zondi, the list goes on. So very fortunate to have ended up at a club where at that particular stage where there were lots of veterans in the team who didn't push you to the side, didn't ignore you, but took you under their wing and mentored you, which is something which is a little bit lacking nowadays in the professional game.
So Matthew, Riaz mentioned one of your highlights being the Olympics. Another highlight, especially for me as a fan, was the 2010 World Cup, where if I look back, it was one of the most amazing months of my life, basically, because as a football fan, the World Cup was here, and I could attend games in Cape Town and PE, but also not only myself as a fan, but it basically got everyone in the country involved. I mean, I remember my grandparents walking the fan walk in town, so they got involved, and they had that excitement, and I think it was such an exciting month for us as fans. But that was a highlight, as fans. But from your side, you were a player and you were in the World Cup squad. So what was it like that month for you in terms of a player, but also as a footballing person?
Yeah, I think for me it was bittersweet because the previous year I played every game at the Confed Cup, and I felt I had a pretty good tournament coming up against number 1 and number 2 in the world, Brazil and Spain. But it's amazing how a couple of weeks in football can be a long time, So a whole year is like, it's a hell of a long time, and so many things can change. So we had a change of coach. Pereira came back. I could see instantly 6 months before the World Cup that I was not a favorite of his. I tried my best during the camps. We went to Brazil for a month. We went to Germany for a month. We were in Durban. We spent almost 5 months away from our families in preparation. And again, that journey was fantastic. But for me, it was about trying to change the coach's mind about me, which I wasn't able to do. But nevertheless, that whole journey and build up, culminating in an open top bus parade in Sandton in front of 200,000 people just before the opening game, was something that will always stick out in my mind. And there was actually a lot of controversy in that bus trip, because they didn't make us aware of it. And I think it was 2 days before the Mexico game. And you can imagine that we didn't want to give the perception that we were already celebrating. And the players, of course, had to concentrate on a big game. So there was a big debate amongst the squad. And I knew that I wasn't going to be starting against Mexico. So I was keen to go and experience the vibe. And afterwards, the coach was actually a little bit sad that he didn't allow the entire squad to go, because we had been away for so long. I don't think the entire squad or every single one of us realized what it meant to the nation. And so for the first time, we got to experience what it actually meant. But it was a fantastic experience. Yeah.
Now, Matthew, of course, earlier in the interview, you touched base on fans not really having a club to identify with, where the culture in terms of fans in South Africa is completely different to what you'd expect or experience in Europe. If memory serves me correctly, you finished your career with Wits locally, and of course, they are an institution in South African football. Now, in South Africa, we have this unique rule and this unique practice where clubs buy other club status. So, of course, a couple of years ago, John Comitis founded Cape Town City by purchasing Mpumalanga Black Aces. And a couple of weeks ago, I woke up to the news that Wits were actually bought by TTM, which shocked me. I felt quite sad. I actually felt quite angry that it happened, because Wits are 1 year shy of their 100th birthday. What's your take on that? And do you think it's a ruling that needs to be changed in South African football, that people can identify with certain clubs? How do we go about sort of rectifying these kind of situations and making certain that a club with such a rich history doesn't just fall by the wayside?
Yeah, so I was fuming when I heard the news, and even more so when you witnessed how they did it. So the clubs have done this on a number of occasions over the last number of years, and they're actually going against Rule 14.4 in the NSL handbook. But when the question is asked of Ivan Corzo, why do they let this happen? His argument is that you cannot prevent a business from getting into financial difficulties and then wanting to sell. So there's a bit of a conundrum there. That's a fair point. But I think we've got to look at international best practice, and we don't want to take from Europe all the time, but they've had over 100 years to get it right. And there, when you come into the business, when you do buy an entity, there's very strict financial stipulations and regulations, as Man City have recently found out, and those are not done here in South Africa, and that's a preventative measure, as best as you can, bring in those regulations and make sure that a new owner coming to the game is on a solid founding, and that the money that he has in his bank account is not illegal, and it's of a regular nature.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's why we have the situation where the teams change names, they lose history, a la Cape Town Spurs, a la Wits next year. But what really made me angry was that when these two entities, TTM and Bidvest, come to some sort of agreement privately, the very next thing that you have to do is negotiate with players and staff, which they didn't do.
Yeah.
It then became public knowledge, and you can imagine the manager of Bidvest, Wits, George Mokhorosi, who's been there for 30 years, the kit man who's been there for 10, 15 years. What's going through their mind? It was really inhumane, the way things transpired. And that's definitely got to improve. That can't happen again.
Do you see it actually, coming to fruition or coming to a point where it does actually improve, or is it just something that is theoretical and isn't actually going to happen?
Yeah, I feel it's got to improve after this experience. I feel that the game is being watered down. We're losing viable, strong entities with a lot of history. Bloemfontein Celtic, Bidvest, Wits. And what will happen is that, again, everything will be centralized towards Johannesburg. You're going to end up with Chiefs, Pirates, and Sundowns. And then who else? You don't want that situation. You want to create a healthy league where you have a strong Celtics, a strong Cape Town City, a strong Ajax Cape Town back up in the league, with strong competition. You don't want to have a centralized football system. You want to have centers of excellence all around the country. So yeah, I think there's got to be some sort of financial regard when somebody gets into the business, and it's not good for the game that there's chopping and changing, because you cannot generate a support base, and you're watering down our game.
Matthew, you mentioned earlier regarding the Bafana camp and being away from your family for extended period of time, which was like 6 months. It's happens now. Like, I have to ask you about your time in Russia, which is, I'm guessing, a bulk of or a big part of your career. You spent around 8 years there, first at Rostov and then at Krylia Sovetov. Can just about pronounce that. I'm sure most of us can point Russia out on a map, but we have no idea where those two clubs are. But like, can you just take us through your time there? Because I did a bit of research, and it looks like your market value back then at when you were at Krylia Sovetov was at its highest at 2.3 million euros. So what was your experience like there, and being 8 years away from South Africa?
Yeah, so I had a number of trials in England, on loan at Wimbledon, going to Scandinavia, and for various reasons, it never worked out. Either I had a rubbish week, or I had a good week, like West Ham, and then my club asked for too much money. It just never transpired. So there was a point in my career in 2002 where I thought, well, I've got to go over and start making euros, or start making dollars. And Victor Bondarenko was my coach at Sundowns, and he came from Rostov. Rostov was in desperate trouble. They were bottom of the log with 10 games to go in the season, and myself and Giv Kampamba left, and we didn't know anything about the league. We knew nothing about the city that we're going to. It was purely a mercenary decision. It turned out, luckily for me, to be a very good one, because the Russian league, or the Russians, were spending a lot of their petrodollars on the league, trying to improve the league. Myself and Gift had an instant impact on the team. I think we didn't lose our first 9 games. With 3 or 4 games to go, we were safe. So the club and the fans adored us, and we established. The following year, we got into the cup final, which was for Rostov, again unheard of. So it turned out to be a good move. I would have loved to have played in England or Spain or a more established league, but I think Russian football has grown in leaps and bounds, and the clubs have had a huge impact on the Champions League and Europa Cup, and it's getting stronger and stronger.
Yeah.
At that time, would you also have envisaged that Russia would host their very own World Cup? When you were playing there, what was the facilities like, and did you see that happening in what 15 years later, or even less? But did you see that happening?
No, not at that stage. Russia it's quite unique. You can't generalize about the place at all. It's so big. You think South Africa is big and multicultural. Russia is also the same, So there was the old generation, the old communist generation and infrastructure. And then there was the new kind of hip hop, MTV, young generation, which was very distinct. You could see both of them very clearly. And that fascinated me. I'm a little bit jealous and envious of the fact that they have brand new stadiums now after the World Cup. And one thing that the Russians have done is that they've made use of that euphoria and the marketing of their local clubs and fans going to the stadiums. Obviously, before lockdown, they were filling up their stadiums. And yeah, that was great to see, and I've followed with interest developments in the Russian Premier League, and they've continued to try and attract some of the best players in Europe, and continue to have an impact in Europe as well.
Just touching on your career in Russia and in Europe, Matthew. When we grew up watching football, we grew up watching Lucas Radebe, captain Leeds United. This is when Leeds were at the top of the Premier League. They were playing in the Champions League. They were playing in what was then the UEFA Cup. Benny McCarthy became a household name. Quentin Fortune played for Manchester United. Delron Buckley turned out for Bochum and for Dortmund in Germany. Sean Bartlett was in Switzerland for, I think, FC Zurich, and then he made his way to Charlton Athletic. Why are our players now not making it into the top European leagues? For me, if I look at our West African counterparts, the West Africans are playing for the top clubs in the top league. And for a long time now, I've had a theory that we're trying so hard to improve the PSL, to bring more money into the league, to improve the infrastructure. We've got some world-class facilities. And correct me if I'm wrong for saying this, because of course you have more insider knowledge than myself as an average fan. Sometimes the feeling I get is that these players are happy to stay at home and sort of tell themselves that they are still in a position where they can make a good living as a professional footballer, instead of having to deal with the obstacles of playing overseas. What do our players have to do to get to the level of, let's say, West African players, and to basically emulate some of our past great South African players?
Yeah, so don't put yourself down. By the way, you all three of you have got fantastic local knowledge, and you forgot your man Quentin Fortune as well. So you're right. There was a generation of fantastic young players who were playing for some top clubs, and my under-23 squad that qualified for the Olympics, virtually all of us were playing local Premier League football as well. So that hasn't been replicated again, and you're absolutely right. And very similar to Russia, not a lot of our local players are taking the opportunity of venturing out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I would recommend any youngster who gets the opportunity to go to Europe or anywhere where there's a good standard of football to go. Not only because you're going to be playing against better players, playing with better players, being coached by better coaches, but also you're going to be learning a new language, a new culture. You are going to be injured, have to go back to a cold, empty apartment with no family or no friends, and that ultimately builds character, and that character building is desperately needed in Bafana Bafana at this stage. And unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword because, you know, the top earners at Chiefs, Pirates, and Sundowns are earning 200, 300K a month. So why should I go and play in Belgium or Turkey for half that amount, you know? So that is an issue. That is an issue. And I take my hat off to the likes of Bongani Zungu, Keegan Dolly, Andili Jali, who have taken the opportunity to go. And they've become better players because of it. So it is a different one, you know, where local players would rather be a big fish, you know, drive the latest Beamer or GTI, you know, have a number of girlfriends and enjoy the atmosphere and comfort of being at home. But I would love to see players getting out of their comfort zone because it will definitely help the nation.
Absolutely.
Matthew, now that you've retired, it's been a few years now. I think you retired in 2014. What have you been up to for the viewers? What have you been up to? I know you had a foundation that you were involved in. Are you still involved with that? Are you doing punditry?
Yeah, so since I retired, I've been doing a bit of TV work with Supersport, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. I've given the makeup ladies a hell of a torrid time, though. I've also, myself and my wife, established our trust in 2009, and what we do is we get ex-professionals to come and help out and to take part in coaching clinics in communities and clubs that are not normally able to afford such, and that's been fantastic for me. I'm also involved in the artificial grass industry, and then I'm also on 2 disciplinary committee panels at the one at the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport, the guys who test all our athletes, and also at the Premier Soccer League's disciplinary committee, which is rather ironic because I was on the other side of the table a number of times in that regard. And last year I finished my BA, which I did through UNISA.
Nice.
Normally you take about 3 years for a BA. You know, I took about 5, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I've been hit on the head too many times, so I'm a lot slower than usual. But yeah, it's something that I would recommend players take advantage of while they're playing. Not enough players study and prepare themselves and network and use that network while they're playing and in the spotlight, so that the transition from their first half of their careers to what I call the second half and afterlife is a lot smoother. A lot of my colleagues unfortunately struggle, and that's something that we're hoping to change as well.
I read an article I think a week ago where Jacob Chiseve, who used to play for Kaizer Chiefs, he was talking about how he's unemployed and he's really struggling now financially. So yeah, absolutely, I mean, I've always felt like the players should have something to fall back on. We've seen you many times on TV. Of course, you're very eloquent and well spoken. So yeah, definitely something to motivate players for for the moments that they do actually hang up their boots.
Yeah, no, it's a huge issue for us. In fact, myself, Brian Beloy, and Stanton Fredericks have just recently created the South African Football Legends, which the first phase is to celebrate our 20-year anniversary with our under-23 team that qualified for 2000. But going forward, we want to provide a platform for players and ex-players to generate an income and become educated. Psychological help as well is also a huge issue once a player hangs up their boots. But yeah, players often leave school early. They suffer from black tax. There's a number of attributes, the whole status thing of wanting to show off. When you see Raheem Sterling
Yeah.
getting off the team bus with a Louis Vuitton. You
Yeah.
naturally want to emulate him, and that's not the right kind of attitude when you
Yeah.
only have 10, 15 years to maximize your earnings. And that kind of attitude and pressure from the community hopefully will abate.
Who do you support?
No, no,
I'm glad I'm not the only one that's anti-United.
No, I'm only joking. But for my sins, I'm a West Ham fan. But we seem to have gotten out of trouble a bit of late, so that's a good sign. They had a great result. Antonio scoring 4. I think it was against Norwich.
Yeah.
So yeah, we seem to be safe enough, but still not out of the danger zone yet.
I think you should be okay because the other teams are struggling.
My brother's a West Ham fan, so I'll let him know that there's one more of you roaming the city.
Yeah. No, too true. I think I know of. I think it's only Gavin Hunt, the local football coach, Wits football coach. I think he's the West Ham fan as well, and he's probably the only one that I know of.
Yeah, there's not too many, but it's a great club, and I'm glad that they're still in the Premier League, and doing. Hopefully, they should be doing better than they currently do. Actually, with
West Ham had their own class, like United had the class of '92. West Ham had their own class. I can't exactly pinpoint the year, but the time of like Joe Cole, Frank Lampard, Rio Ferdinand, they had quite a good set of prodigies coming out of the club.
Yeah, you're right. And Gavin Hunt, his father-in-law was the late Budgie Byrne, who played for West Ham in England. He was part of that 66 squad. And he was one of the old school English coaches that coached me at Cape Town Spurs during my early years. But the reason why I support them was I went on trial when Harry Redknapp was coaching them, and they were about to sell. Okay. They were about to sell Rio Ferdinand to Leeds, and I had a really good week there. Unfortunately, my club here in South Africa asked for too much money, so it fell through. And in hindsight, that was one of my most disappointing moments of my career. But they've got a fantastic youth development there. They produce some fantastic young players, and so that always kind of stuck with me,
Matthew, I've got a few questions, just short questions, which require short answers, basically in a quiz-type form. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to ask. So who was your closest friend in football?
Probably Macbeth Sibaya. I spent a lot of time with him leading up to the World Cup as roommates, and we got up to a lot of mischief there.
He was always a favorite of ours.
Matthew, who was your favorite coach to play under?
Yeah, I had a number of them and some characters, but I think the most advanced for his time was a guy called Leonid Slutsky. I met him at Krylia Sovetov. He was one of the few Russian coaches who were quite young and progressive. He used a lot of technology and statistics. And one of the few Russian coaches, actually went. I think he coached at Hull for a very short period of time, but one of the few Russian coaches that coached outside of Russia.
Outside. Okay.
Interesting. And then you've played for a few different clubs, but which club probably holds the closest to your heart?
That's difficult. I'll probably say Mamelodi Sundowns. My first 3 years, Mamelodi Sundowns. We won the double when I arrived, and then the following year we got to the Champions League final against Al Ahly. So that will always stand out for me from a club point of view. Yeah.
And then second last question: the best player that you've played with, and the best player you've played against.
Locally. That's a difficult one. Locally, I'd probably say Surprise Marui. He had probably the best first touch I've ever seen globally anywhere. He was fantastic. He didn't seem to get out of third gear. He made it look so easy. To play against the World Youth champs in Malaysia, 1997. We qualified under 20s, and our third and last group game was against France. And we came up against a Thierry Henry, David Trezeguet, and Nicolas on the bench. So it was an awesome duo to come up against. Yeah.
And then the last of the
a lot of these quiz questions I realize can get you in a lot of hot water. We're asking you is like, we'll see me have one more.
Yeah, the last one, which is probably very important to us as fans. Who would you say is your favorite or is better, Messi or Ronaldo?
That's an easy one. Messi for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Look,
we're all Messi fans. We're all Messi fans. So.
I must be honest. I both think we're never going to see a duo like this ever again. And we were so fortunate to have the World Cup on our doorstep. I mean, we're so fortunate to have been born during a time where we're able to see both of them go up against each other. But for me as a defender, to come up against a player that's short, quick, and that can use both left and right feet equally well is just, it's a difficult task to do. And luckily for me, that never happened against the likes of Messi.
Yeah, I saw an interview a couple of years ago where they were interviewing Mamadou Diarra, and Mamadou Diarra was talking about an El Clasico game that took place at the Nou Camp, and what he said was he had a conversation on the pitch with Fabio Cannavaro, and Messi came on the pitch, and Diarra told Cannavaro, "You need to watch out for this little guy," and Cannavaro's response was, "Don't worry, I'm going to kick him." Safe to say, he never got close to Messi, and I think Messi scored an equalizer that night. So yeah, definitely a brilliant player. They're both brilliant players. The three of us are very pro Messi, but just his footballing brain and his ability to do outrageous. I mean, it's never been seen before. And when they both retire, we're gonna be worse off without them. But I think I'll cry a bit more for Messi for now.
I think Messi's got that raw talent that just it's like hard to imagine anyone else. Obviously, we never know. In future, there could be another one, but I know Ronaldo works his socks off, like that's for sure, and that's how he is obviously, kept at that level and kept Messi going as well.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, Messi's ability to run with his head down and then also see what you wouldn't have imagined him to be able to see is just phenomenal. I think that's what makes the difference for me.
Totally, I think for me also, he's capable of being one of the all-time top scorers. But if you look at his game, also he's managed to assist so many goals, and his vision is on its own would have been world class. But if you add all of that together, it just makes one ultimate player, I think the greatest of all time. But from our side, Matthew, we just want to thank you for your time, for availing yourself, and we've thoroughly enjoyed this. I know I have. So thank you for that. And yeah, I think one day we'd like to invite you again on the show. But thanks for spending your time with us and sharing your vast football knowledge with us.
It's a pleasure, gentlemen, and I'm looking forward to the second time on. So thanks for the invite once again, guys.